You've probably heard the expression that determination leads to success. And you may think, is that true? Maybe you're determined and you've never seen success. Maybe you've given up. I want to share a story with you that is something that stays with me at all times, no matter when I feel like giving up or when I'm just sick of everything and things just aren't working out. I always go back to what someone once said to me. When I was a child, I had two dreams. One was to be an actor, and the other one was to drive. I wanted to drive a car so bad. I remember as a little kid, I had this little yellow pedal car, which was like a dump truck, and it broke. I remember the actual dump part of the truck broke off, and then the pedals didn't work anymore. So I would actually walk the vehicle around my yard while staring it, and imagine myself driving it. And that never went away. My father would buy new cars every year, and I was always fascinated by his cars. I was always... sometimes me and my brothers would sit by the road and just watch cars drive by. I don't know what it was. I wanted to drive so badly. So you can imagine the excitement in me when I turned 16. And I joined driver's ed the day after I turned 16. And there I am in class. I'm getting excited. I'm like, wow, this is finally happening. It's finally happening. And then disaster struck. The only way I could pay for driver's ed was through my restaurant job. I was a busboy. I was 16, and I had worked there for 2 years, and they laid me off. And then soon after that, they closed shop and took off. I could no longer pay for driver's ed, so I couldn't go. And I was disappointed. A couple months later, the school came to me and said, hey, we heard about what happened, and don't worry about it. You can take driver's ed. You could finish it up. And that was awesome. I was like, great. So I get into driver's ed, I finish it up, and I never really had a chance to get much practice behind the wheel because my timing was screwed up. And I didn't have anybody in my family who could really show me. My father took me out once to drive, and that was it. So I didn't have a lot of practice. So I go for my test, and I failed. Then I went for my second test. A year later, I failed. It wasn't until my third test, two and a half years after I turned 16, when I finally passed. And this time I passed with flying colors. I nailed that written test, and I always won the written test, by the way. Never failed that. It was the driving part. And this time the driving part went so well, even though the instructor was like, oh, you did perfectly. You got your license. He didn't even finish the whole thing. He knew right away that I had it down. So great. But it took 2.5 years. This thing I had been dreaming about my whole life, that I couldn't wait until I was 16. Now it wasn't until 18 when I finally got my license. But now, how am I going to drive? That summer, I got to drive a U-Haul, and it was thrilling. I was like, to finally drive. But I didn't have a car, and I only drove the U-Haul for one day. So then I started saving up for a car, and that didn't go well. It wouldn't be until another 2 years later before I finally bought my first car. It was a truck, a 1978 Chevy Blazer. And what was interesting about it, a quick little story here. The night before I went to go see this truck, I had a dream. I dreamt the truck and everything that happened. It's bizarre. And I remember driving up the driveway to go see this truck and telling my friend, hey, let me tell you about my dream. And then when we both pulled up to the house, he looked at me and says, okay, you sure you're not psychic? Because my dream was exactly everything that happened was in my dream. It was amazing. But as I would find out, that dream was a warning. Because, that truck died out soon after I bought it. And I only had it on the road for about a month. And it ended up costing me $3,000 trying to restore that thing. So, my first car really didn't last long. Didn't last long at all. And so that's when my brother gave me his crappy little car. And that car was in bad shape. Burned oil, would break down everywhere, didn't have any heat. It was one of the worst winters I've had, and there was no heat in the car. The windows would freeze up. I couldn't see to drive. I'd freeze my ass off in there. There was no radio, so I actually figured out how to rig up a portable CD player and a speaker and put it in the center of the car, and that's how I listened to my music, which was fine. That was actually kind of fun. But the car had no heat, which sucked, and then the power steering went, which, that was fine. I got used to that. But the car gave me so much trouble that I could never actually live out my dream of just going for a drive and having the fun of driving, because I could only drive to work, and that was it. The car was unreliable for anything else. And the truck, I never went for a joyride with that, ever. Just never had the chance, and that sucked, because that was a monster truck. This thing had big mud tires on it, 400 engine, 4-barrel carburetor. This thing was a monster, but couldn't get the damn thing to work. Well, I ended up finally having enough. The car was bad. I couldn't keep buying these crappy cars or driving crappy cars. I had to get something better. So I started going to the dealer. And I got rejected 19 times. 2 years of this. Rejection after rejection after rejection after rejection. Every day I go to work disappointed. Sometimes I'd have to leave work early to go to a dealership, and my boss was all for it because they knew how unreliable my cars were, and for them, they knew that I'd be much more reliable in showing up on time because I wouldn't have these car problems. A lot of times the damn car wouldn't start. It would take me an hour to get the stupid thing going, or it would die out in traffic and the engine would flood. So everybody was for it. But every day they'd see me come back to work the next day disappointed. This went on for 2 years. Now I'm 22 years old. 22. And finally, after 6 years since I turned 16, I finally bought a nice truck. My first car that I can actually drive. So, a little before I quit my factory job, the assembly job that I was doing 10 years ago, one of my coworkers took me aside and said, Mike, I want to tell you something. A lot of people say that they're going to do this or they're going to do that, and you always tell us that you're going to make it big in the movies and this and that. And a lot of times you hear people like that, and you're like, they'll never make it. They don't have it in them. They're not determined enough, or they don't believe it enough. He goes, but you, I don't doubt, you are going to make it. He said, I saw what you went through with those cars and all of the crap that you went through, and how many days you'd come in here with that disappointment on your face, and things didn't work out, and how long it took. But that day I saw you pull into the parking lot in that new truck, I had to stop in my tracks and said, oh my God, he did it. He actually did it. He said, you are the most determined son of a bitch I've ever met. I don't know anybody like you. I would have quit months ago, years ago, but you never did. You set your eyes on something, and you fought for it. And you fought all the way to the end. And then you won. And he said, you're going to make it. Whatever you do, you're going to make it. I had never thought of myself as being determined until he told me that story. I never thought about it. It just wasn't something that crossed my mind. And I didn't realize that was the kind of person I was. But ever since he said that, I always keep that in mind. And whenever I feel down and I feel like I'm not going to make it, I remember that. And I remember that situation. Now I can drive. And I love driving. Well, sometimes. Dealing with people on the road, that's another story. But the fact is that I can hop into my car now and drive and drive and drive. Success, it can happen if you're determined. Determination will lead to success. But if you're not determined and if you don't believe in it, it's not going to happen. You're going to get nowhere. And you're just going to keep fighting and fighting and fighting, and nothing's going to happen. Always remember that. Always remember that, and try to learn how to be determined and then stay with it and stick to it. And you'll be like me, and you'll reach success. Thanks for watching. Hey, thanks for watching the video. Please be sure to subscribe by clicking here. And hey, while you're at it, visit my site here for lots of cool content and yes, some free stuff. Hey, who doesn't love free stuff? I don't. Shut up.